The city was alive at night. Bright neon lights flickered on every corner, casting colorful shadows across the streets. Cars zoomed by, their engines roaring like angry beasts. Above, drones hovered silently, watching everything. This was Neo City, a place where humans and robots lived side by side. But not everyone treated this world with care. In one dark alleyway, far from the crowded main roads, a group of bikers gathered. They called themselves the Razor Gang. Their leader, a tall man with sharp eyes and a cruel smile, went by the name Razor. He loved speed, danger, and chaos. And tonight, he had something special planned. Razor stood in front of his gang, his leather jacket gleaming under the dim light of a broken street lamp. His motorcycle rested nearby, its engine still worn from their earlier ride. Behind him were 5 other bikers, all dressed in black and wearing matching helmets. They laughed loudly, their voices echoing through the empty alley. Tonight, Razor said, raising his fist in the air, we show the city who's boss. The others cheered. They revved their bikes, the sound filling the silence of the night. Then, without warning, they took off. Tires screeched as they sped out of the alley and onto the main road. Pedestrians jumped out of the way, shouting curses that the bikers ignored. For them, it was all about fun, no matter who got hurt. As they raced through the city, Razor spotted something moving ahead. It was small and quick, darting between parked cars. At first, he thought it was a stray cat, but when he got closer, he realized it wasn't an animal, it was a robot. A robotic dog, to be exact. The dog looked old and battered. Its metal body was scratched, and one of its legs seemed damaged. It limped along slowly, trying to stay out of sight. Razor smirked. To him, this little machine was nothing more than a toy waiting to be broken. Hey, check it out. Razor yelled over the noise of the engines. A worthless piece of junk. The other bikers slowed down, circling around the poor dog. One of them leaned forward on his bike, pointing at it. What do we do with it? He asked. Razor didn't answer right away. Instead, he stared at the dog, thinking. Finally, he grinned. Let's teach it a lesson, he said coldly. Robots like this think they're better than us. We'll show them they're not. Without hesitation, Razor kicked his bike into high gear. He aimed straight for the dog. The others followed, laughing as they chased it down the street. The dog tried to run, but its damaged leg made it slow. There was no escape. When Razor got close enough, he swung his leg out and kicked the dog hard. The impact sent it flying into a pile of trash cans. Metal clanged against metal as the dog hit the ground. Sparks flew from its body, and its glowing eyes flickered before going dark. The bikers howled with laughter. That was easy, one of them shouted. Yeah, another added. Serves it right for being so weak. But what none of them knew was that this wasn't just any robot. Far away, in a quiet apartment on the edge of the city, Jason Statham sat alone. On the floor beside him lay tools and wires. In front of him was a screen showing live footage from a drone camera. His eyes widened in shock as he watched the attack unfold. Jason clenched his fists tightly. That dog belonged to him. Its name was Echo, and it wasn't just a machine. Echo was special. Jason had built it himself, using parts salvaged from fallen soldiers. Inside Echo's programming were fragments of memories, pieces of Jason's past, reminders of people he had lost. To Jason, Echo was family. For a moment, Jason couldn't move. Anger burned inside him, hotter than anything he'd ever felt. How dare they? How dare they hurt something so precious? He stood up quickly, grabbing his jacket. His mind raced with plans. First, he needed to find Echo. Then he would deal with the bikers. No one messed with his family and got away with it. Meanwhile, back in the alley, the bikers celebrated their victory. Razor patted his bike proudly. Good job, team, he said. We showed that thing who's in charge. Little did they know, their actions had set off a chain reaction. Somewhere in the shadows, someone powerful was watching. Someone who wouldn't forgive or forget. Someone named Jason Statham. Jason Statham lived alone in a small apartment on the edge of Neo City. The building was old, its walls cracked and covered in graffiti. But Jason didn't care about the looks. To him, it was home, a quiet place where he could think, work, and remember. The apartment wasn't much. There was a tiny kitchen, a cluttered living room, and a bedroom barely big enough for a bed. But what made it special were the tools scattered everywhere. Screwdrivers, wires, and metal parts lay on every surface. In the middle of the chaos stood Jason, always working on something new. Jason was a man of few words. His face was hard, marked by years of pain and struggle. Deep lines ran across his forehead, and his eyes carried a sadness that no one could miss. He was tall and strong, with muscles built from years of training as a soldier. But now he spent most of his time fixing robots, or more specifically, Echo. Echo was Jason's robotic dog. It wasn't just any robot. Jason had built Echo himself, using parts from machines that had once belonged to his fallen comrades. Each piece held meaning. A gear here came from a friend who died saving lives. A circuit board there was salvaged from a soldier who gave everything for their team. And inside Echo's programming were fragments of memories, pieces of conversations, laughter, and even tears. These memories weren't perfect, but they helped Jason feel close to those he had lost. Every night, Jason would sit on the floor of his living room, tinkering with Echo. Sometimes he'd talk to the dog as if it were human. He'd say, "You remind me of them, of all of them." Echo would tilt its head, glowing eyes blinking softly, as though listening carefully. Jason knew Echo couldn't truly understand, but it felt good to pretend. But Jason's life hadn't always been like this. Once upon a time, he had been different. Before Neo City became the cold, chaotic place it was today, Jason had been a soldier. Not just any soldier, he was one of the best. People called him fearless, unstoppable. He worked for the government, fighting wars against greedy corporations that wanted to control advanced technology. Back then, Jason believed in honor, duty, and justice. Then came the day that changed everything. It started with a mission. Jason and his team were sent to stop a powerful corporation from stealing AI tech. The plan was simple: sneak into the facility, destroy the stolen tech, and get out alive. But things went wrong, terribly wrong. As soon as they entered the building, alarms blared. Guards swarmed them, armed with weapons far deadlier than anything Jason's team had expected. They fought bravely, taking down enemy after enemy. But the numbers were too great. One by one, Jason's teammates fell. First, Sarah, the medic who always kept everyone calm. Then Marcus, the tech expert who could fix anything. Finally, Lewis, the jokester who lightened even the darkest moments. By the end of the battle, only Jason remained. Surrounded and outnumbered, he managed to escape, but at a terrible cost. His friends were gone. Worse still, the corporation got away with the stolen tech. Jason returned home empty-handed, carrying nothing but guilt and regret. That loss broke him. For months, he stayed locked in his apartment, refusing to see anyone. He stopped answering calls from old friends and ignored messages from commanders asking him to rejoin the fight. The world outside moved on, but Jason couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw their faces: Sarah, Marcus, Louis. Their voices echoed in his dreams, blaming him for failing them. Eventually, Jason realized he needed something to keep going, something to hold on to. That's when he decided to build Echo. Creating Echo wasn't easy. Jason poured every ounce of energy into the project. He scavenged parts from abandoned machines, traded supplies with underground dealers, and taught himself how to program AI. It took years, but finally, Echo came to life. At first, Echo was clumsy. Its movements were jerky, and its responses slow. But over time, Jason improved it. He added upgrades, fine-tuned its systems, and programmed it with memories of his lost friends. Slowly, Echo became more than just a machine. It became a companion. With Echo by his side, Jason began to heal. He still missed his friends, but the pain wasn't as sharp. Echo reminded him of happier times, of laughter and camaraderie. Together, they explored Neo City, helping those in need. Jason became a vigilant, protecting the weak and standing up for what was right. He wasn't part of the government anymore, but he still believed in justice. Now, sitting in his apartment, Jason stared at the drone footage of Echo lying motionless in the alley. His hands trembled as he clenched his fists. How dare they? How dare they hurt something so precious? For a moment, Jason let himself feel the anger. It burned hot, hotter than anything he'd ever known. But beneath the anger was something else: sadness. Sadness because he had failed again, failed to protect someone he cared about. Jason shook his head. No, this time would be different. This time he wouldn't let them win. He stood up and grabbed his jacket. On the table lay a map of Neo City. Jason studied it carefully, tracing possible routes the bikers might have taken. He also checked the cameras mounted on nearby buildings. Thanks to his hacking skills, he gained access to live feeds within minutes. Soon, he found what he was looking for: a blurry image of the gang speeding toward an area known as the underbelly. The underbelly was dangerous. It was a lawless zone controlled by gangs and corrupt corporations. Most people avoided it, but Jason didn't care. If the bikers were hiding there, that's where he would go. Before leaving, Jason packed a few essentials: a wrench, a flashlight, and a small device he called the signal jammer. It was designed to disable drones and security systems temporarily. He slipped it into his pocket, knowing it might come in handy. As he stepped outside, the cool night air hit his face. The streets were quiet, except for the distant hum of neon lights. Jason walked briskly, his mind focused. He didn't know exactly what awaited him in the underbelly, but he was ready, ready to fight, ready to protect, ready to make sure no one ever heard Echo or anyone else again. Little did Jason know this journey would change him forever. But for now, his only goal was clear: find Echo, confront the bikers, and make them pay. Jason moved quickly through the dark streets of Neo City. His boots clicked against the pavement as he headed toward the underbelly, the most dangerous part of town. It wasn't safe there, but Jason didn't care. He had one goal in mind: find Echo and teach the bikers a lesson they'd never forget. The air grew colder as Jason approached the underbelly. The bright neon lights of the main city faded behind him, replaced by flickering street lamps and shadows. Buildings here were crumbling, their walls covered in graffiti. Trash littered the ground, and stray robots wandered aimlessly, abandoned by their owners. This was a place where no one cared about rules or lives. Jason tightened his grip on the flashlight in his hand. He knew this area well. Years ago, when he first became a vigilante, he spent weeks exploring the underbelly to understand its secrets. Now those secrets would help him track down the bikers. As he walked, Jason pulled out the small device he called the signal jammer. It was a tool he had built himself, designed to disable drones and security cameras temporarily. He activated it, and within seconds, the faint hum of nearby surveillance systems went silent. No one would see him coming. His next step was to check the drone footage again. Earlier, he had hacked into the cameras and spotted the bikers heading toward an old factory at the edge of the underbelly. That factory was abandoned now, but it had once been used to repair and recycle robots. If the bikers were hiding somewhere, it would be there. Jason quickened his pace. The sooner he found them, the better. But as he got closer to the factory, he began to notice something strange. The streets were unusually quiet, too quiet. Even the stray robots that usually roamed the area were gone. Something wasn't right. Suddenly, a low growl echoed from the shadows. Jason froze. Slowly, he turned his flashlight toward the sound. There, standing in the darkness, was a large robotic dog. Its metallic body gleamed under the dim light, and its glowing red eyes locked onto Jason. For a moment, neither moved. Then the robot lunged forward, bearing sharp metal teeth. Jason reacted instantly. He swung his wrench hard, hitting the robot squarely on its head. Sparks flew as the machine staggered back, stunned but not defeated. It growled again, louder this time. Jason sighed. Not now, he muttered under his breath. He didn't have time for this. Every second wasted fighting robots meant less time finding Echo. Thinking fast, Jason reached into his pocket and pulled out another gadget, a small EMP, electromagnetic pulse device. He pressed the button, and a soft blue light pulsed outward. The robotic dog froze mid-step, its systems shutting down completely. It collapsed to the ground with a heavy thud. "Sorry, buddy," Jason said, stepping over the motionless machine, "but I've got bigger problems." Finally, Jason reached the factory. It loomed ahead of him, its broken windows like empty eyes staring into the night. The entrance was guarded by two men wearing leather jackets and helmets, the biker's signature look. They leaned casually against the wall, chatting and laughing. Jason crouched behind a pile of crates, watching them carefully. He needed a plan. Charging in blindly wouldn't work. There could be more bikers inside. Instead, he decided to use stealth. He waited until the guards turned their backs, then slipped around the side of the building. Using his signal jammer, he disabled the cameras near the door. Once the coast was clear, he pushed the heavy metal door open just enough to slip inside. The factory was dark and smelled of oil and rust. Old machinery lay scattered across the floor, half buried under layers of dust. In the distance, Jason could hear voices, angry, loud, and full of arrogance. They were close. Jason crept forward, staying low and avoiding any loose objects that might give him away. As he moved deeper into the factory, he spotted a group of bikers gathered around a fire they had started in an old oil drum. Their leader, Razor, stood at the center, talking animatedly. You should have seen it, Razor boasted, holding up his boot. One kick, and that stupid robot went flying. Pathetic. The other bikers laughed, clapping each other on the back. None of them noticed Jason slipping behind a stack of crates nearby. From his hiding spot, Jason scanned the room. His heart sank when he saw Echo lying on the floor a few feet away. The poor dog was still damaged, its glowing eyes dim and flickering weakly. Jason clenched his fists. Seeing Echo hurt made him angrier than ever. But he forced himself to stay calm. Acting rashly would only get him caught, and worse, it might put Echo in even more danger. Instead, Jason focused on listening to the bikers' conversation. Razor was explaining their next move. Tomorrow night, he said, we hit the market district. Those rich folks won't know what hit him. The others cheered, raising bottles of alcohol in celebration. Jason realized this was his chance. If he could take them down now, he'd not only save Echo, but also stop them from causing more harm. Carefully, Jason reached into his bag and pulled out a smoke bomb. He lit it quietly and rolled it toward the bikers. Within seconds, thick gray smoke filled the room, making it impossible to see. What's going on? One of the bikers shouted, coughing. It's a trap, another yelled, scrambling to grab his weapon. Chaos erupted as the bikers stumbled around blindly. Jason took advantage of the confusion. He darted out from his hiding spot, moving swiftly and silently. His first target was a biker trying to run for the exit. Jason tackled him to the ground, knocking him unconscious with a single punch. Next, he grabbed a wrench from his belt and swung it at another biker who came charging at him. The impact sent the man sprawling backward. One by one, Jason took them down, using his strength and training to overpower them. Razor watched in shock as his gang fell apart. Who's doing this? He screamed, searching through the smoke for the attacker. Jason stepped into view, his face grim. Me, he said simply. Razor sneered. You think you can take me on? You're outnumbered. Not anymore, Jason replied, pointing to the unconscious bikers lying around them. Razor hesitated for a moment, then charged at Jason with a knife in hand. Jason dodged easily, grabbing Razor's arm and twisting it until the knife clattered to the floor. With a swift kick, he knocked Razor off his feet and pinned him down. Don't move, Jason growled, pressing the wrench against Razor's throat. Where's my dog? Razor glared at him, but didn't answer. Jason pressed harder. I said, where's my dog? Finally, Razor nodded toward Echo. Over there, he spat. Take your stupid robot and leave us alone. Jason released Razor and hurried to Echo's side. The dog was in bad shape, its circuits sparking and its frame dented. Jason knelt beside it, gently running his fingers over its metal body. I'm sorry, boy, he whispered. I'll fix you, I promise. With Echo in his arms, Jason stood up and faced Razor one last time. If I ever see you hurting anyone, or anything, again, you won't live to regret it. Then, without another word, Jason turned and walked away. Behind him, the remaining bikers groaned and cursed, but none dared to follow. As Jason carried Echo out of the factory, he felt a mix of relief and anger. Relief because he had saved his companion, and anger because people like Razor existed. People who thought they could do whatever they wanted without consequences. But Jason knew this fight wasn't over. Saving Echo was just the beginning. Somewhere out there, countless others, both human and robot, needed protection. And Jason Statham wasn't about to stop fighting anytime soon. Jason Statham stood at the edge of the old factory, holding Echo tightly in his arms. The robotic dog was damaged, its glowing eyes flickering weakly. Jason's jaw tightened as he looked back at the chaos he had left behind. The unconscious bikers sprawled across the floor, and Razor glaring at him with hate-filled eyes. But Jason wasn't done yet. He couldn't walk away knowing Razor and his gang might cause more harm. They had hurt Echo, and they didn't understand the importance of respecting life, whether human or robotic. Jason knew this fight wasn't just about revenge. It was about sending a message. No one could treat others cruelly and get away with it. With Echo safely tucked under one arm, Jason moved deeper into the factory. His steps were quiet but purposeful. Somewhere inside, Razor was regrouping with whatever bikers were still conscious. Jason could hear faint voices echoing through the empty halls. They were planning something. As he approached a large open area, Jason spotted them. Razor stood in the center, surrounded by 3 other bikers. Their faces were bruised and bloody from earlier, but their eyes burned with anger. They weren't giving up without a fight. You think you're tough? Razor shouted, spotting Jason. You're nothing but a coward hiding behind machines. Jason didn't respond. Instead, he gently placed Echo on the ground nearby, making sure the dog was out of harm's way. Then he straightened up, his body tense and ready. His gaze locked onto Razor's. If you want to settle this, Jason said calmly, let's do it now. Razor smirked. Fine, but don't cry when we beat you down. The bikers spread out, forming a loose circle around Jason. Each of them held makeshift weapons, metal pipes, chains, and knives. Jason had only his fists, his wrench, and his training. But that was enough. The first biker lunged at him, swinging a metal pipe wildly. Jason ducked, avoiding the blow, and countered with a sharp punch to the man's stomach. The biker doubled over, gasping for air. Before he could recover, Jason delivered a swift kick to his leg, sending him crashing to the ground. Another biker attacked from behind, trying to catch Jason off guard, but Jason heard the sound of footsteps and spun around just in time. He blocked the knife aimed at his chest and twisted the biker's wrist until the weapon clattered to the floor. With a quick elbow strike, Jason knocked the man unconscious. By now, the remaining two bikers hesitated. They exchanged nervous glances, unsure if they wanted to face Jason alone. But Razor stepped forward, his eyes blazing with fury. Enough, Razor roared. You want a real fight? Here I am. He charged at Jason, wielding a thick chain like a whip. The chain whistled through the air as Razor swung it hard. Jason dodged the first strike, then the second. But Razor was fast, and the third swing caught Jason across the shoulder. Pain shot through his body, but he gritted his teeth and stayed focused. You see, Razor taunted, spinning the chain above his head. Robots may be strong, but humans are smarter. That's why we rule them. Jason didn't answer. Instead, he waited for the right moment. When Razor swung the chain again, Jason grabbed it midair with both hands. Using all his strength, he yanked the chain toward him, pulling Razor off balance. As Razor stumbled forward, Jason slammed his wrench into the side of Razor's head. The impact sent Razor sprawling to the floor. For a moment, everything went silent. The last biker standing dropped his weapon and raised his hands in surrender. I'm done, he shouted. Don't hit me. Jason ignored him. His attention was on Razor, who lay groaning on the ground. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead, and his proud expression was gone. Defeat stared back at Jason. You think robots are tools? Jason asked, his voice cold and steady. They're more than that. They have feelings, memories, and purpose, just like us. Razor spat on the ground. They're machines, he muttered. Nothing more. Jason shook his head. That's where you're wrong. And because of people like you, the world will never change. Without another word, Jason turned his back on Razor and walked over to Echo. The robotic dog was still lying where he had left it, its systems barely functioning. Jason knelt beside it, examining the damage carefully. Echo's body was dented, and several wires hung loose. One of its legs was bent at an awkward angle, and its power core flickered weakly. Jason sighed. Fixing Echo wouldn't be easy, but he refused to give up. He opened his bag and pulled out tools, a screwdriver, pliers, and spare parts. Working quickly, he began repairing the dog. As Jason worked, he noticed movement out of the corner of his eye. It was one of the rogue robots he had seen earlier outside the factory. The same robotic dog he had disabled with the EMP device was now awake and watching him curiously. Its red eyes glowed softly as it approached cautiously. Jason paused, unsure what to expect. Would the robot attack him? But instead, it stopped a few feet away and tilted its head, almost as if asking a question. I'm not here to hurt you, Jason said softly. I just want to help my friend. The robot seemed to understand. It sat down quietly, observing as Jason continued working on Echo. For a brief moment, Jason felt a strange sense of connection, not just with Echo, but with this other robot too. Maybe not all machines were enemies. Maybe some just needed someone to care for them. After what felt like hours, Jason finally finished. He flipped a switch on Echo's side, and the dog's glowing eyes brightened instantly. Slowly, Echo stood up, testing its repaired leg. It wagged its tail, or rather the mechanical equivalent of a tail, and nuzzled against Jason's hand. You're okay, Jason whispered, smiling despite himself. Let's go home. But before they could leave, a loud noise echoed through the factory. Jason turned to see Razor struggling to his feet, his face twisted with rage. In his hand, he held a small device, a detonator. You won't win, Razor screamed. If I can't have this place, no one will. Jason's heart sank. He recognized the device immediately. It was rigged to explosives hidden throughout the factory. If Razor pressed the button, the entire building would collapse. Don't do it, Jason warned, stepping forward. You'll kill yourself too. I don't care, Razor yelled. Better to die than lose. Echo growled softly, sensing the danger. Jason glanced at the robot beside him, then back at Razor. There was no time to argue. He had to act fast. Echo, stay here, Jason ordered. Then he sprinted toward Razor, moving faster than ever before. Razor's finger hovered over the detonator, his lips curled into a crazed smile. But Jason was quicker. With a flying tackle, he knocked Razor to the ground. The detonator flew out of Razor's hand and skidded across the floor. Jason pinned Razor down, pressing his knee into the man's chest. It's over, Jason said firmly. You lost. Razor struggled, but it was useless. Jason grabbed the detonator and crushed it under his boot, rendering it useless. Then he stood up and looked around at the ruined factory. The bikers were defeated, and the immediate threat was neutralized. Jason walked back to Echo and the other robot. Together, they made their way out of the factory, leaving the chaos behind. Outside, the night air was cool and refreshing. Jason took a deep breath, feeling a mix of exhaustion and relief. Looking down at Echo, Jason smiled. We did it, boy. Let's go home. And as they disappeared into the shadows of Neo City, Jason knew this victory was just the start. There were still many battles ahead, but he was ready. For Echo, for justice, and for a better future. Jason Statham walked silently through the streets of Neo City, Echo trotting happily beside him. The robotic dog was fully repaired now, its glowing eyes bright and its movements smooth. For the first time in days, Jason felt a sense of peace. But he knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. When they reached Jason's apartment, he opened the door and stepped inside. The place was still messy, with tools scattered across the floor and wires hanging from every surface. But to Jason, it was home. He set his bag down and sat on the couch, leaning back with a tired sigh. Echo jumped onto the couch beside him, nuzzling against his hand. Jason smiled softly and scratched behind the dog's metal ear. You're okay now, he said quietly. We made it. But even as he spoke, Jason's mind raced. What had happened at the factory wouldn't stay hidden for long. People would hear about Razor's defeat, and about the man who stood up for robots. Some might cheer, but others would resist. Jason knew he couldn't stop fighting. Not yet. The next morning, Jason decided to take a walk. He wanted to clear his head and see how the city was reacting to the events of the past few days. As he strolled through the streets, he noticed something unusual. Groups of people were gathered around nude screens mounted on walls, watching intently. Curious, Jason stopped to listen. On the screen, a reporter was talking about the attack on the robotic dog, Echo, and the mysterious vigilante who had confronted the bikers. Footage showed parts of the fight at the factory, captured by nearby drones before Jason disabled them. The video ended with a close-up of Jason standing over Razor, looking strong and determined. The crowd murmured among themselves. Some nodded approvingly, while others frowned. One woman turned to her friend and said, "Finally, someone's standing up for the robots." Another man chimed in, "If humans keep treating machines like trash, we'll never have peace." Jason listened carefully, feeling a mix of pride and worry. His actions had sparked a conversation, something he hadn't expected. People were starting to question their treatment of robots, but not everyone agreed. In one corner of the crowd, a group of men argued loudly.